Part 7. Infinite Doomsday Start Draws Luodu Mechanic. Author, Shan Mao Ai Chi. Chapter 61. Just like that, the deadlock that had lasted for an unknown amount of time was broken by the sudden appearance of two people and a car. Needless to say, all the fallen Rog were wiped out, and all the monsters who were harassing them were also wiped out. Seeing that the enemy that had besieged her for a long time was beaten away by an iron monster that suddenly jumped out, Minerva was not happy and reacted in surprise. The twin axes and halberds were firmly protected on her chest, and she looked at the chariot warily. Looking at that posture, I almost shouted, "Whoever comes, please tell me your name." But she didn't need to shout. The next moment, the red-haired girl jumped out of the trunk and ran over to the female warrior while waving to her. Seeing her teammate Tia actually jumping out of the iron monster, Minerva was shocked and finally breathed a sigh of relief. Taiwan Novel Network Rightward Arrow. After a while, she grabbed Tia, who ran up to her and asked in a deep voice, "Why are you here? Why are you here?" Tia on the other side also asked the same question at the same time. Both of them were stunned, and then they answered at the same time. I can't explain this sentence or two. This is a long story to say. This. The two looked at each other, waiting for the other to speak first, but this time they stopped talking. Ha ha ha. The two finally laughed. Where are the others? Tia asked after she calmed down. Is it possible? What Tia meant was that everyone else was dead or captured by Wei Mei, right? Minerva shook her head. This matter can't be explained in one or two sentences. Let's find a quiet place to talk about it first. Oh, what on earth are you tin monsters? She turned to look at the little chariot and asked with burning eyes. Weapons of the lost. Tia replied proudly with her hands on her hips. Weapons of the lost. Minerva was stunned. Are they those fire sticks? Aren't those just toys that tickle people? There is actually such a big thing. Also, weren't those you just shot out with your flame explosion? You can actually travel that far. Are these all weapons of the lost? Oh, the ones that hurt me just now feel like a lost weapon. Is that what you use too? It seems that despite being on the same team as Tia, this barbarian female warrior doesn't know much about firearms and weapons. Hearing Minerva's words later, someone couldn't help but shrink his neck. Hee, there are still many things you don't know. Tia smiled, pointed to the remote-controlled machine gun and the lugger in the car, and immediately threw the blame away. But don't get me wrong, it wasn't me who just hit you, it was him, it was all him. Oh. The female warrior couldn't help but look sideways at Lugger. Lugger, who had sensed something was wrong and retreated into the cockpit, couldn't help but curse in his heart. Sure enough, Tia had already made up her mind to make herself take the blame. This little girl is usually well behaved and clever, but for some reason she wants to frame her this time. Little Tia over there actually didn't quite understand what she wanted to do. She just felt an inexplicable sense of crisis in her heart after seeing Minerva. Subconsciously, I wanted to create some conflicts between them. Lugger, who was crying without tears, was waiting for the female warrior to take revenge on him, but he didn't expect that she would glance at him charmingly. Hoo, I like strong men best. Boy, you just hit me so much that it hurts. Not bad, I like it. Hey. How could it still be like this? For a moment, not only Lugger was stunned, but even little Tia suddenly became nervous. She clenched her fists and hurriedly walked to the female warrior, blocking her view of Lugger. What are you going to do? Xiaosha asked, stammering. But unexpectedly, the female warrior actually smiled and said, Hey, the little guy is still protecting Sheer. Don't worry, you can't expect your friend's wife. I still know this kind of thing. Since he is your man, well, I won't compete with you. What are you talking about? Tia didn't expect that she would say these words at all, and couldn't help but blush and lower her head. Hey, you two, talk about it later if you have something to do. Another enemy is coming around. Lugger, who was a little further away in the back row, pointed to the horizon and didn't hear the whispers between the two at all. The two people here quickly gathered themselves and looked over. Okay. Not only were the patrol bees from before, but there were also more than a dozen steel-blade mantises. A string of flying monsters came straight towards the three of them with great momentum. Oh, get out. Xiaotia grabbed the female warrior with her backhand and ran towards the chariot. Why are you running? You are so powerful, why don't you kill them all? Lu Ji heard this and said to himself, eldest sister, are all the muscles in your head too? Let's not talk about whether we can kill them, at least it will take time. Now in the enemy's lair, their troops are constantly flowing, but our ammunition is limited. The longer you fight with them, the worse it will be for you, okay? In fact, the most important thing for Ruger is that the purchase of anti-aircraft ammunition costs a lot of points. Even if you support war with war, you can only break even at best, and it is simply impossible to make money. So he would rather go back and clean up several ground ghost groups than fight with these high-mobility ghosts. He had already told Tia the trick, well, except for the cost calculation. It was just simplified to the lack of ammunition. So it was just right for Tia to explain to Minerva at this time, saving him a lot of words. When both of them got on the car, he immediately shot puffs of smoke around and drove the chariot away from the battlefield with the help of the fog. On the other side, because she was too tall to get into the car, the female warrior had to chat with Tia while smoking and blowing the wind. So, those fallen rogues fell from the sky with you? Tia asked in astonishment with her eyes wide open. The female warrior covered her nose and frowned, nodding miserably. Seeing this, Tia quickly handed her a protective mask and asked. The others are still on the ground. Are you the only one who was thrown here because of the sudden collapse of the ground? The female warrior nodded and shook her head, took a deep breath with the help of the mask, and added. I am not the only one who fell down, but also Lord Blood Crow. What, Sister Sarah also fell down? Who is commanding the burial ground war zone now? Won't the battle line there collapse? I don't know. If there are no other accidents, it is very likely that Anya took over the command, right? The female warrior smiled bitterly and shook her head. I hope that guy has enough ability to stabilize the battle line. Anya, Tia pouted, that guy has a head full of conspiracies and tricks, but when it comes to war strategies, he is only at the kindergarten level. How did things turn out like this? Minerva sighed when she heard this, and after thinking about it, she simply started from the beginning. It started from the first meeting between Tia Ruger and the 4 barbarian female warriors. The witch Anya had a gloomy face since she was humiliated by Ruger using the bristle-haired mouse that was ambushed in the bushes. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu Mechanic. Author, Shanmao Aichiji. Chapter 62. The 3 teammates of Tia, who were coerced by her with the order of Akara, the actual supreme leader of the nuns, did not dare to talk to her along the way, let alone talk about what happened before. They could only wink and gloat behind someone's back. Anya knew this but could do nothing about it. She just hated Tia and Lugger, the culprits of all this, more in her heart. At least, Minerva, who was watching from the sidelines, thought so. With deep resentment, the witch Anya led a group of people to their destination, the burial place of the front line of defense. Just like in the original game, the periphery of Rogue Town is an open area, called the Blood Wasteland. This area is very large, and the periphery is surrounded by dense forests. The place where Lugger landed before, including the place where he fought with Tia, and the evil cave, are all in this Blood Wasteland. To the east of the Blood Wasteland, there is an area called the Cold Plain, and to the east is a rugged hill. There used to be a fortress built beside the hill. If the monsters occupying the eastern cathedral want to attack Rogue Town, they must pass through there. Of course, they can also bypass the forest for sneak attacks. In fact, there is no shortage of monsters emerging from the forest. However, the road conditions in the forest are complicated and the traffic rate is not high. Usually, hundreds of monsters go in, and only dozens can come out. As a result, it became a primary monster for the novices in Rogue Town to practice. And with the impact year after year and day after day, the fortress on the hill has long been flattened. Only the broken walls and ruins remained there, which is called the Stone Plain. When it fell, the Rogue Town side wanted to take the opportunity to use the unused explosives to destroy the passages, forcing the monsters to pass through the mountain caves and exhaust the expedition. But unfortunately, they didn't make it in time. However, the retreating human resistance army finally came up with a way to seal the cold plain. In this way, if the monsters don't want to take the forest path, they have to attack from the stone plains around the periphery of the cold plain. There is a relatively complex terrain there, which is very suitable for long-range units to conduct guerrilla warfare, the Boneyard. Now it is the rogues in the town who have formed a guerrilla team, relying on the geographical advantage to fight guerrilla warfare with the monster-attacking army. Rogue, that is the origin of the name of Rogue Town. It is said to be a branch separated from the Amazon tribe, believing in the artifact called the Blind Eye, and the core is the Blind Sisterhood. So the weapons they use are the same as Amazon, all bows and arrows, spears, javelins, etc. The nominal highest leader of the Blind Sisterhood is the senior monk Akara. But for the rogue troops, they also have more direct leaders, the military chief Kasha, and the battlefield commander. According to Ruger's understanding, Akara is like the head of this political entity, similar to the president. The military chief is similar to the Minister of Defense or the Chief of Staff or the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, etc. After all, the Blind Sisterhood has a small number of members and a relatively simple structure, so there is no need to discuss whether the Minister of Defense or the Chief of Staff is smaller. The battlefield commander is the direct commander of a fighting force on the front line. Similar to a general going to war. Blood Crow is such a general. Blood Crow is a title, a strong man among the rogues. The archer in the first generation of Darkness is a rogue with this title. After close contact with Diablo, the Blood Crow, whose real name is Morena, was gradually invaded and corrupted by magic. He even resurrected zombie skeletons in the burial ground, causing a big blow to the rogue camp. After leading the new generation of rogues to clear out these monsters and kill the previous generation of Blood Crows, a new generation of rogues regained the title of Blood Crow. That is the current rogue battlefield commander, Sister Sarah in Tia's mouth. It is precisely because the original mausoleum had been destroyed by monsters long ago that the surviving rogues simply put aside their psychological revenge and transformed the resting place of their ancestors into a new defense line. The purpose of Anya and her group's departure from the city this time was to help Sarah, who was under increasing pressure, to resist the crazy attacks of monsters one after another. After decades of fighting, the Nephilim in Rogue Town could not break into the monster base camp to recapture the eastern monastery, and the monsters could not rush to the Blood Wasteland to destroy Rogue Town. However, the stalemate between the two sides retreated from the previous middle to the burial ground, which was only one step away from the Blood Wasteland. From this point of view, the situation on the human side is already very critical. But the humans in the game don't seem to think so. As Tia said, the stalemate between monsters and humans in the burial ground has lasted for 7 or 8 years or even 10 years. After so many years of persistence, humans have become accustomed to carrying the attacks of monsters while continuing to live. In comparison, the monsters' recent crazy attack seemed very abnormal. For this reason, almost half of the available troops in Rogue Town were deployed to the front line battlefield. If Tia had not come out to make bombs at that time, it might not be just her 3 teammates who were ordered to support Sarah. The 3 plus Anya, 4 fairly strong Nephilim joined Xancha, which was indeed like a shot of adrenaline for the front line. The shaky front line was soon stabilized with their help. However, the good times did not last long. The monsters that were beaten back several times did not stop, but gathered more and more. As a result, in another melee, several people and Sarah and other rogues were fighting with the monsters, and suddenly a cracking sound was heard. Everyone on the field saw that the ground under their feet suddenly collapsed into a big hole. As luck would have it, the commander Sarah just missed it. Everyone was shocked and didn't know what to do. Minerva rushed over first, trying to use her long-handled weapon to help Sarah, who was falling. As a result, before she ran to the initial big hole, the ground collapsed again halfway and she fell down. The female warrior thought she would be killed directly by the sudden collapse of the ground, but she didn't expect that there was a different world below. The most amazing thing is that she found herself falling on a hillside not long after she fell freely. Although she didn't stop in time because of the huge momentum, the friction of the slope slowed down her speed, and she only wore out her outer armor, and she didn't suffer much damage herself. But there are pros and cons. She was not seriously injured, and the enemies that fell with her, the fallen rogues, were also injured. So after they fell to the foot of the mountain and regained their mobility, the two sides started fighting again. Originally, the female warrior could definitely beat the fallen rogues alone. As a result, a group of insects appeared from nowhere during the fight. As soon as they appeared, they attacked them without distinguishing between enemies and enemies. Although, for Guime, they were actually all enemies. In short, this led to the previous scene. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shanmao Aichiji. Chapter 63. So, you don't know where Sister Sarah is. Searching Google only found out that she was thrown here too. Beside the campfire, Tia asked the female warrior while passing the roasted bee legs. While the female warrior was speaking, everyone had already thrown away the pursuers and found a place to make a simple camp, covered with a camouflage net. Taiwan Novel Network rightward arrow. Minerva nodded, took a bite of the bee leg meat, and couldn't help but nod in admiration. After eating up the stick on her hand in 2 or 3 mouthfuls and licking the remaining oil on her hand, the female warrior turned her head to look at the two of them. I've finished talking about mine, now let's talk about yours. Also, where is this place? Where else could this be? Tia spread her hands. This is the charming cave. The place where our seed-gatherer forefathers harvested fresh seeds. What? This is the charming cave? The female warrior rolled her eyes and pretended to be enlightened. Hey, what's your expression? Isn't it too perfunctory? Tia said dissatisfied. Hoo, have you been discovered? The female warrior shrugged indifferently. Except for the mysterious caves, I can't think of any other place where there are so many mysterious insects. They are not good at using force, so they know that disgusting people have been eaten by those monsters in other places, but there are so many here. Needless to say, this must be the legendary Lost Ruins, the charming cave. I know you still ask, Tia said angrily. Well, guesses are just guesses. Now with your official certification, wouldn't it be more worry-free? The female warrior took the bee leg that Tia sent again and continued, I just didn't expect that this is the one you want to go to. I didn't expect it to be so big here. This place is so big, no matter where I go, it will probably lead to here in the end. Tia shook the bee leg in her hand and made 2 gestures. That's right, Minerva nodded noncommittally, then asked, have you got the seeds? Got it? Then, you want to go back to town? Yeah, on the way. Lost. What a pity, I don't know the way either. Besides, I don't want to leave either. Why are you so humming? Can you say something else? Okay, you want to say that you want to stay and save Sister Sarah. Hey, I asked you to say something else, not to steal my lines. Sister-in-law, it's my fault, okay. Don't be like this, it's so uncomfortable. Yet Taya winked and smiled and hummed again. Dong. Over there, Minerva couldn't bear it and punched Tia on the shoulder, but her reinforced armor plate shocked her fingers so much that they went numb. Wow, your new armor is so tough. Did you take the time to change your equipment? Taya, let me discuss this with you. You see, sister, I am the only one who can fight in close combat. Why don't I let my sister wear the armor first? Sister rushed forward to block the knife for you, it's the same thing. Hey, why are you asking for someone else's armor as soon as we meet? Tia said while trying her best to push Minerva out, who was hugging her. I'll make another set for you if you want. As she said that, she couldn't help but look at Luodu next to her. Hearing this, the female warrior looked at Taya and then at Luodu, very confused. Is it possible that not only the steel monster just now was made by this human being, but also your armor? That's right, Taya looked proud, Brother Luodu made this for me too. But when she said it, she felt a little regretful and felt that she had done something wrong again. But thinking about it again, she would still say that even if the same thing happened next time. I'll just say it. The female warrior looked back and forth between the two of them with flickering eyes, thinking that Xiaodia would have given up the armor to her long ago, even if she had said all the words she had said before. Now you are actually saying that you are making a set? Hoo, is that what happened? After figuring out what was going on, Minerva simply walked over to Luodu and whispered to him. Brother is very powerful. How did he meet our Taya? Could it be that he is the child of those alchemy assistants? But why don't I remember seeing you? Taya felt somewhat guilty after hearing this, and quickly wanted to help Luodu pick up the conversation and deal with it. However, before she could speak, Luodu, who had been frowning and thinking about something, asked instead. You mean you fell onto the hillside shortly after you fell, and then slid all the way down the hillside to the ground? Yes, that's what happened. The female warrior was a little surprised but nodded, and then laughed again. Hey, your way of thinking about things is a bit stiff. However, Taya also frowned, thought for a while and said, Brother Luodu, you mean? Luodu nodded and looked at the sky outside the camouflage tent, especially those towering pillars standing in the space, and those peaks with cracks leading to the ground above their heads. So, that's what happened, X2. Tia, who followed his eyes, said with him. Hey, what are you talking about? What's going on? Don't play riddles, just tell me if you have something to say. It's so uncomfortable to hold it in. The two smiled at each other, and when Ruger gestured with his hand, Tia coughed and explained to the female warrior. Do you see those pillars outside that touch the sky and the earth? Yes. Then do you see those lush mountains? Yes. And the cracks on the top of the cave? Well, what's wrong? Didn't you find that there is a crack on the top of every green mountain, and there is a mountain under every crack? So, what do you want to say? In fact, there was no mountain in the cave. The pillars broke, and there were mountains. Those cracks leading to the ground were the tops of the pillars before. Those sunken grounds are all big holes dug by these ghosts. You may not have seen it yet. They use this method to lure monsters here, and then kill them and use them as fertilizer to nourish their seeds. They regard monsters as prey. Tia turned her head and looked at Minerva. You fell down, it's not accidental, you fell into the hunting trap of the ghost. Is that so? The female warrior seemed to understand. Also, Ruger continued, You said that the monsters suddenly attacked the human defense line recently for some reason. Could it be that this is actually the case? It was the hunting caves dug by the ghosts that harvested a large number of monsters. After the monsters sensed it, they thought you had strengthened your forces, so they sent more monsters accordingly. So the front line was tight, your pressure doubled, and you hurried to invest more troops. This did drive the monsters out, but at the same time it also made the monsters confirm that there was something wrong with the human side, so they increased their forces again, and then a vicious cycle. That's why you had to go to the front line to support. It's very likely. The female warrior nodded thoughtfully, and turned to look at Tia. Tia also nodded. In this case, everything makes sense. Then the last question is here, Ruger said. Why did the ghost do this? Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shanmao Aichiji. Chapter 64. Could it be that after decades of reproduction, they feel that it is time for them to counterattack the ground? Ruger thought. This is a question, a critical and good question. Because, at the same time he asked this question, the system ding-dong sounded again, twice. Triggering task. Task 4, Objective, help the barbarian warrior Minerva rescue the rogue commander Blood Raven Sarah. Task reward, 2000 points. Task 5, Objective, explore the reason why the ghost opened the underground door. Task reward, 2000 points. Task 1, explore the lost ruins. Task 2, complete the food transmission. Task 3, kill 5 death waves. 2 tasks popped up in a row and each reward was 2000 points. Ruger was so excited. But he also knew that the higher the reward for the task given by the system, the greater the risk. Helping Xiaotia get fresh seeds, the task reward is only 600 points, and it has not been fully completed yet. But looking at the ups and downs along the way, it can't compare to the 81 difficulties of the whole journey to the west. At least there are 7 or 8 difficulties in the beginning. Now he has triggered 2 tasks with 2000 points reward, which can only mean that there are many things waiting for him in the future. But then again, at the beginning, Ruger only had a pump-action shotgun and a small pistol that has almost lost its sense of existence. Didn't he also attack the ghost cave with these primary weapons? Now, he not only has a small tank, but also added 2 remote-controlled machine guns and even a rapid-fire mortar howitzer to the tank. The ghosts he encountered on the road before no longer pose any threat to him now. 2000 is just more than 3 times but less than 4 times of 600. How irresistible is the suffering that is 4 times stronger than the previous difficulties? So, when Tia and the female warrior both looked over, Ruger thought for a moment and said, no matter what they are planning, let's just go and save Lord Bloodcrow first. I believe we can collect more intelligence along the way. This is the benefit of having a system in hand. 2 tasks just popped up, seemingly unrelated, but seeing that they were triggered at the same time, Ruger knew that they were definitely inseparable. In his opinion, the system was hinting that as long as he went to save Sarah, the Blood Crow, he could figure out the secret behind the ghosts. In this case, what else did he have to say? Now that there is an extra helper, and a melee fighter who can charge and carry, Ruger is confident that he can play something big with the ghosts. In this way, some places that the 2 of them didn't dare to go to before can now be explored on their own initiative. This is Ruger's real idea. In the name of saving the Blood Crow, he actually explored the ghost's nest. The 2 lines run parallel but not contradictory. 4000 points are waving at him in front. With such a big pie in front of him, Ruger was not stingy with the current investment. The first thing to do was to make a set of armor for the female warrior. In addition, the 2 axes and halberds of the female warrior were also damaged in the previous battle. Although they were not made of ordinary iron, they became bumpy after many fights. Little Tia suggested that she could polish them, but Ruger waved his hand and simply gave away the other 2 steel-blade mantis knives. A steel-blade mantis has 4 front claws. Tia took 2, and Ruger had 2 left, just right for the female warrior. The guillotine forelimbs of the steel-blade mantis are very similar to the axe head of the axe and halberd. Minerva took the long-handled sword and waved it twice, nodding with satisfaction. Although the center of gravity of the 2 weapons is different, with her strength, she can use them as easily as her arm with a little adaptation. At the same time, the female warrior said in amazement, "I like strong men the most. I like generous men the second. Tia, sister wants to make a deal with you, why don't you give this man to me?" Tia didn't say anything after hearing this, but immediately stood in front of Ruger, protecting him behind her, and looked at the female warrior vigilantly but firmly. The meaning is self-evident. Don't be so stingy, sister will share with you at most. He belongs to you during the day, sister only wants his night. Well, hearing that the topic is going in the direction of inappropriate for children, Ruger hurriedly coughed and interrupted. "You are ready, right? Then let's go quickly." The small chariot is indeed a little small. Ruger was originally more than 1.8 meters tall. Under the effect of a series of attribute enhancement potions, he now has the signs of secondary development and has grown to 1.85 meters. In order to sit in the small chariot, his seat is actually tilted. It was said before that he stood up and stretched his head out of the cabin to see the road during normal driving, but he was actually lying down. He could solve the problem of insufficient space in the cockpit by lying down, but the rear gunner cabin was not possible. The female warrior, who was already more than 1.9 meters tall, could not sit in the rear compartment after wearing the armor modified with homogeneous steel plates. In the end, Ruger used some scraps to make a simple chassis, which was a piece of iron plate with 2 pairs of wheels under it, and then connected it to the back of the small tank. It was called a special seat for female warriors, but it was actually the most primitive and crude truck trailer. Minerva had no complaints about this. On the contrary, she had a deeper liking for Lugger, who did not force herself to get into small holes. If she was just deliberately teasing Tia by teasing Lugger before, now she is becoming more and more sincere. She almost gave Lugger a big hug despite Tia's flaming eyes. But in the end, he just gave him a slap on the head. Needless to say, at that moment, Lugger seemed to have returned to the painful time of being dominated by the girls in the back seat, in elementary school and junior high school. Even though Lugger is over 1.8 meters tall, he was not too late to develop as a child, but he is from Donkey. According to statistics from various provinces in China, the average height of Dongqi people has always been ranked very high, even first. It is said that when people from the south come to Donkey, they will feel overwhelmed because the streets are full of tall people. But, wouldn't the Dongqi people themselves not be attacked? Can you imagine that after you have grown to 1.71 meters and 8.0 meters, you are still in the last row and can only sit in the middle of the class? Especially the girl in the back row who is over 1.9 meters tall. She will slap you on the head from time to time, touch your head to kill you, and say that your little brother should be good and your sister will give you sweets. That's simply a nightmare. Moreover, Ruger discovered after working that as the children's nutrition became better and better, the problem of being taller became more and more serious. I have always heard people say that people in Qi and Lu in the pre-Qin period were very tall. Luge still didn't believe it, thinking that there might be some discrepancies in the conversion of length measurement units in different eras. Now when he saw the height of the juniors who had kept up with the nutrition, he believed it. With the resources available to those who could leave a mark in the history books at that time, they must eat well, drink well, consume enough protein, and not be too normal to grow tall. However, it seems that because of the memory of being dominated by a tall girl, Lugger has some lingering fears for this barbarian female warrior, but at the same time he also feels some affinity. Perhaps this unintentional kindness also made the female warrior more fond of him, so she liked to tease and play with him. Infinite Doomsday Start Draws Luodu Mechanic. Author, Shanmao Aichiji. Chapter 65. This was not Ruger's own guess, but what the female warrior said to Tia herself. Google search reading. The original words were that she subconsciously had an inexplicable liking for Ruger. The two women were not in the same car, and they communicated using the in-car wired phone. So Ruger also heard everything clearly. Minerva was not aware of this, but Tia knew it. For some reason, she did not remind the female warrior and directly used this line to talk about her daughter's concerns. After listening to Minerva's explanation, Tia was somewhat non-committal. She didn't know that Ruger's recollection of the past was regarded as a characterization of the female warrior's behavior, and she no longer entangled it. For Tia, she only knew that it seemed that her brother Ruger was very popular with girls. God has mercy on me. If Ruger really had this ability, would he be saved your mother? Tia's mood was very complicated. On the one hand, she was a little complacent, and on the other hand, she was a little distressed. It's fine now. If I go back to Rogue Town in the future, it will be troublesome if those rogues also take a fancy to Ruger. Oh, it seems that I have to save Blood Crow Sarah now. This hero saving the beauty is the easiest to be liked. Sister Sarah has been single for so many years without a partner. Isn't this sending a sheep into the tiger's mouth? What should I do? Seeing that Tia's little head is turning faster and faster in the unfamiliar field, it is afraid that it will be boiling if it goes on for a while. At the critical moment, fortunately, Gaimei appeared to save the situation and rescued her from overly complicated thoughts. On the side of Gaimei, it seems that because of the previous many failures, the quality of the troops sent out is getting higher and higher. Those arms that could only be cannon fodder in the past are almost no longer seen. Even the grasshopper cannon, which was a reliable main unit before, now seems to have become the basic arm that must appear every time and has the largest number. However, the guns are still the same guns. The armor-piercing ability of the old guns in World War II was not bad at the time, but it was a bit behind in the Cold War. This is not to say that even the armor of Ruger's Honey Badger tank can ignore those World War II armor-piercing shells. It's just that they don't have many armor-piercing shells, so they are not a big threat to him overall. They are mostly grenades. Even if this thing hits the homogeneous steel plate armor directly, it will only make the car shake for a while, and it won't cause much damage. Moreover, the design of the front slope of the Honey Badger tank is also good for the defense against solid armor-piercing shells. Even if the first generation of solid armor-piercing shells hit there is a high probability of ricochet due to the slope. The only one who will be injured is the female warrior outside the body armor. However, the grasshopper cannon is less threatening to the female warrior. As soon as the battle started, she jumped off the hanging bucket, waved two long-handled steel knives, and countless ghosts fell down. It's really the big windmill is spinning. Don't say it, it seems that the barbarians really have such a trick. After many battles, Ruger also wanted to learn from her. It's a pity that he has limited talent in this area and failed to learn it. He even failed to trigger the system's learning mechanism of solidification by spending points. When he learned from Minerva that the source of their barbarians' abilities was something like oaths and prohibitions, Ruger vaguely understood why he couldn't learn their skills. His method was wrong. In fact, when he heard the name oaths and prohibitions, Ruger was still somewhat shocked. Barbarians, when he heard this name in Western fantasy works, he subconsciously thought it should be from the perspective of the Roman Empire. In this case, this name probably refers to the Germanic barbarians in the north of Rome who eventually destroyed the Western Roman Empire. So he has always been a little strange, thinking why in fantasy works, when talking about barbarians, they always have dark hair instead of German blonde hair and blue eyes. Now listening to it, well, how can it be said that the Germans are viewed from the perspective of the Roman Empire? It is clearly the Celts viewed from the perspective of the Anglo-Saxons. No wonder, No wonder. No wonder I heard that the background setting of Diablo says that barbarians and druids were once the same tribe. Aren't these Celtic warriors and wizards? As for the barbarians in the snowy mountains in the north, aren't they the Picts in the Scottish Highlands? Think about it again, the blue stripes painted on the face of the barbarian in Diablo are exactly the same as the blue stripes on the face of the protagonist in the old movie Braveheart. This is so Scottish, isn't it? Good guy, Ruger is still wondering why there are barbarians in so many Western fantasy works. Although their image is still positive in the later period, they are still labeled as backward and ignorant, just with a little bit of innocent heart. How could the Germans, led by the Anglo-Saxons, always blacken themselves like this? It's not that they haven't blackened other Germans, such as the Vikings who went south to plunder hundreds of years later than them, and they were also blackened a lot, but it seems that there are signs of being whitened as they blacken. But the image of the Vikings and the image of the barbarians are not the same in most works. Even if they secretly changed the image of barbarians to a better one like they did with Vikings, who came up with the idea to discredit them in the first place? After all, it was the Anglo-Saxons who expanded this image to the whole world. Good fellow, Ruger only realized now that these doubts were simply a misunderstanding. Barbarians do not refer to Germans at all, but Celtic natives in the eyes of Anglo-Saxons. In this way, all the strange things can be explained. These guys, no matter whose territory they robbed, they would blacken the natives. Even if they robbed the territory of a race that was obviously hundreds or thousands of years more civilized than themselves, they could come up with various ways to blacken the people from various angles. From Rome to Greece, from Central Asia to East Asia. After thinking about these, Ruger felt that things were really a layer of window paper, and it was instantly logical after it was broken. Let's not talk about his feelings about the twists and turns behind the prototype of the barbarian, just talk about the power system. After confirming that the barbarian power system was actually the Celtic contract and prohibition, he didn't want to learn these from Minerva anymore. Oaths and prohibitions, oaths and constraints, are also elements that are often seen in various magical themes in later generations. Originated from Celtic mythology. Generally speaking, the reason why demigod heroes have superpowers is because they have made oaths and prohibitions with the gods or with the help of gods. Their powerful powers all come at a price. In mythology, after they succeeded with the blessing of power, they were often backfired because the prohibition was broken. For example, King Arthur, the owner of the Sword of Victory and Oath, finally broke the taboo of the sword must not lose the scabbard. He had a sword that could cut iron like mud, but he died at the hands of a traitor. Yes, the legend of King Arthur is also a Celtic myth. I don't know how people manipulated it. When people mention him, they always think he is a legend of England. What Merlin the Great Wizard, he is obviously a druid. In short, the advantages and disadvantages of this power system are quite obvious. The advantage is that it is obtained quickly and the power is strong. The disadvantage is that once the weakness is exposed, it is very fatal. Although the abilities of the barbarians in the Dark World are only derived from this system and are not exactly the same, the general feeling is not much different. At least the details of how Ruger got this power from the female warrior made him feel that the source of the barbarians' power and the reason why they are called barbaric are basically the same. They are strong because they maintain a barbaric lifestyle. Although not the original words, this is what Ruger finally concluded. What about training naked in harsh environments to build up physical strength, and what about using real swords and fatal moves when practicing fighting with fellow tribesmen? These are all manifestations of this kind of restriction. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shanmao Aichiji. Chapter 66. This also explains another doubt of Ruger. It's a bit complicated to say. Minerva's name comes from the name of a Roman god. She herself is a Southern European and is not a natural barbarian. After the fragments of the Dark World fell into the world of the lost, the Nephilim no longer determined their inheritance based on race, but instead cast the net widely, catch more fish, and choose the best. Although it is true that the genes of Southern Europeans cannot produce tall people, it is not easy for a girl who is over 1.9 meters tall to appear, and she happens to accept the inheritance of barbarians. No matter how you look at it, you don't think the probability is high. But after hearing the principles of how barbarians beat their bodies, Luger understood. He has been practicing that method since he was a child, and absorbing the magic that floats in the environment, or as the savages would say, the energy of nature. As long as you do this and meet the standards, you will naturally grow taller and rounder. The thought of being able to grow taller and bigger was very tempting to Ruger. But when it came to asking him to maintain the so-called barbaric lifestyle and to practice fighting all the time, he lost interest. It's more suitable for me to drive a tank, sing songs, and control machine guns to shoot. Luger sighed and worked harder to deal with the charming group in front of him. Speaking of which, this was already the 7th or 8th battle since they started investigating and exploring the underground cave. By the time he recovered from his memories, the battle had come to an end unknowingly. The familiar faces that had appeared before were like deadly wounds to everyone who was already familiar with their characteristics. And those new types are not much better. For example, those sharp-horned beetles covered in thick armor. Another example is the saw-blade spider with a pile of saw blades in its mouth. To be honest, the new sharp-horned beetles that appeared like knight's spears or even drills posed a relatively large threat to the group. Those old World War II guns and cannons, if they hit hard, they can't hit them accurately, and if they hit them accurately, they can't hit them hard. It means that if you hit with great power, you will miss, and if you hit with little power, you will miss. It didn't pose any decent threat to Ruger. But this kind of drill beetle is fast, has high defense, and its attack power is absolutely fatal to the small tank. It really makes Luger nervous. But he had been able to go around so much in the past, and obviously this thing didn't do anything to him in the end. That's because although these guys are powerful, they are not in large numbers. After Luctia Minerva consciously focused the fire, they were wiped out immediately. With these things eliminated, those familiar defeated generals will be less vulnerable. Tisk tisk, there's nothing new, let's go. After cleaning the battlefield, Luge once again recovered a belly full of materials. He looked like a scoundrel who scolded the cook when he was full. He smashed his mouth and said to the two women. The two of them had seen him look like this several times and ignored him, just thinking about it. According to Ruger, the blood crow Sarah should have come down from a peak near where Minerva fell. However, the three of them circled around here several times and couldn't find any clues about her. Where else can she go, Xiaodia thought. Have you climbed the mountain to escape? Minerva asked. Why, she can jump dozens or even hundreds of meters high in one jump, Luge, who was ignored, walked over and interjected. How is that possible? I am the best jumper in town, and even I can only jump less than 10 meters high. The female warrior waved her hands. Only 10 meters. Luger was speechless for a while. Good guy, I said before that Taya can do Ching Kung, but the real master of Ching Kung is you. What else is possible? Is it possible that she has been killed? Because the corpse was also eaten and digested by the fungus carpet, so no traces of her were found. Xiaodia said again. What kind of creep? What are you eating? What the hell? The female warrior immediately changed her color after hearing this. What have you experienced before? Ah, no, no, no. As long as there are patrol bees around here with germ blankets, we will kill them all. Even if that person is dead, the corpse should not be eaten by the fungus in time. Luge took advantage of Tia to explain the previous events to Minerva and thought about it. I was wondering, is there a possibility that she might have been kidnapped by the ghosts? What? Are the charms kidnapping people? Taya asked. Yeah. Maybe you didn't see it? During the previous battle in the charming gathering area, there were some fallen rogues who escaped. It seemed that they were taken away by the charming prisoners. Is there such a thing? Tia and the female warrior looked at each other. How is this possible? How could something happen? Lugger, who was hiding in the chariot, saw it, but the two people on the battlefield didn't. In fact, it was all compiled by Ruger. He was gambling based on the words in the system's task list. Because in the mission description, it's better to rescue Sarah instead of retrieving her body or revenge her. The simplest logic, if this mission did not fail, at least it means that Sarah's current condition is still within the range of being able to be saved. Well, maybe she is dead, but her soul is imprisoned, and rescuing her soul is also a kind of salvation. That's the stuff of Ruger's gamble. Also, for example, whether system tasks will go wrong or not, it can also be regarded as his bet. Ruger is just betting that things won't be that bad. Betting that Sarah won't be that bad. If that's the case, then maybe she was kidnapped by the ghost. After listening to Ruger's words, Tia muttered after thinking for a moment. What should we do then? Do we have to search all over this place like looking for a needle in a haystack? Or should we look around nearby to see if we can find any clues about Sister Sarah? Isn't there enough time? Minerva also thought. Assuming that she was really kidnapped by the ghost after she fainted, does that mean that the longer we delay, the more dangerous her situation will be? It's possible. What can we do? Tia also became impatient. Brother Lu, do you have any good ideas? Ruger thought for a while. There is a way, but it's not good, and it's a bit rotten. Is there really a way? The female warrior said in surprise. Smart men, As a barbarian, she didn't say I like smart men against her will. In contrast, Taya's expression was much simpler. She just looked at Ruger with a burning hopeful look. What is the method, Lu Ji? Tell me quickly. Ruger pinched his nose and smacked his lips, hesitating for a long time before saying. Look, let's assume that the Blood Crow was captured by the ghost. We don't know where she was captured. But we can be captured by the ghost again. You mean, be a bait? Deliberately be captured by the ghost. Taya immediately understood what he meant. Wait, who will be the bait? Isn't this too dangerous? If something goes wrong, it won't be the bait but the real one, the female warrior said hurriedly. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu Mechanic. Author, Shanmao Aichiji. Chapter 67. So, only one person can do the task of baiting. Search and read on Google, Ruger said, slowly looking at Tia. The female warrior was a little surprised and confused when she saw Tia also nodded and said. Writing this, I hope readers will remember our domain name Taiwan Novel Network Rightward Arrow. Well, I'll be the bait, just right. Wait a minute. What's going on? Why, the female warrior hurriedly stopped her. His bad idea is okay, let him use it as bait. Before Lugger could answer, Taya said first, because I have a nagging voice. It can help get the message across to you. Old Noisy, the female warrior thought for a moment and then suddenly realized, oh, you mean your invisible pet? But none of us can see it? No, Taya shook her head and pointed at Luge. Brother Lu can see it? What, can he see it? Can he see your magic pet that no one can see? The female warrior was more surprised this time than ever before. She looked at Lugger as if she were looking at some alien creature. Although technically she is the alien creature, well, at least the apprentice of the alien creature. Wait a moment, after being confused for a while, the female warrior thought of something again. Since he can see your pet, let him be the bait. Can't you just let your pet out and accompany him? The error tolerance rate is too low. Tia shook her head. We don't know what else is going to happen on the road. Besides, the distance and time that Launeo can leave me is limited. Once it has to come back to me, won't the connection between us be broken? But wouldn't it be the same if you were used as bait? The female warrior asked again. Not exactly the same. If I were to be the bait, Launeo would come back to me and come out after resting, and try to find a way to contact you. But, can he find us? The female warrior asked again. No problem. Tia nodded and glanced at Lugger. I wasn't sure before, but now, I believe it will definitely be able to contact Brother Lu. Tia's confidence is not difficult to understand. All because, during this adventure, she discovered a new ability of Launeo. Precisely because she knew that Launoise had this ability, Tia firmly believed that it would be most appropriate for her to complete Lugger's decoy task herself. That ability is to detect and even intercept radio signals. Launoise can intercept the signal of Wei Mei's flying mobile phone, and of course he can also intercept the radio signal sent by Ruger. In this way, if an accident occurs and the two parties lose contact, Gauneo can still follow the radio sent by Lugger and find it back. The biggest risk is that if the chain is left off for too long, so that it cannot receive Lugger's signal, or if it receives it but cannot reach it, then everything will be lost. However, with the radius of this underground cave being 20 kilometers, unless it stretches the crotch too much, it won't cause that level of problems. Why? The female warrior continued to ask, but saw that the two of them had already turned around and started to prepare. Just do it. Since time was tight and they only thought of such a feasible method, the two of them immediately got busy. Tia is trying to find some special alchemy potions, like the breadcrumbs scattered in fairy tales, to provide Lugger with more clues to pursue. On Lugger's side, he was making all kinds of explosives and protective armor, trying to fill Tia's small dimensional satchel with these things. His idea was also simple. If the plan failed to keep up with the changes and the action went wrong, at least Tia would have the ability to escape from that place on her own. Seeing the two of them busy there but extremely harmonious, the surprised and confused female warrior slowly calmed down, and finally felt envious. All joking aside, there was a hint of sincerity in what she teased Lugger before. But seeing the two of them now, she knew that that was impossible. The tacit understanding between these two people has reached the point where even if they are busy each other, their style of painting is extremely harmonious. An hour later, near another mysterious settlement, the three people who were ready nodded to each other and started the bait operation. Lugger didn't have to play this time. It was too suspicious for a heavily armed chariot to be driven away by Sui Mei before it was seriously damaged. What? Then let it run after being severely damaged? Ruger couldn't bear it. Their script was that the two female warriors went to attack Sui Mei together, but soon discovered that they had underestimated the enemy, so they quickly retreated. As a result, an accident occurred during the escape. One of them was accidentally hit by a mysterious poison or other attack and fell to the ground. Another person wanted to go over to save him, but was forced to leave by the besieging Jume. By the time she broke through the siege and rushed to her companion, the man who fell to the ground had been kidnapped by Guime. The script is very simple and the requirements for acting skills are not high. The audience is not very picky, after all, they are all spooky. However, Lugger was still afraid of screwing up the performance. Nothing else. The main thing is that this barbarian sister who needs to perform a performance that feels like she lacks strength is really too powerful. But when the fight started, Lugger realized that he had forgotten the famous saying, "Women all lie, and the more beautiful the woman, the more likely she is to lie." Lugger had played some third-generation games and had seen the female barbarians in them. To be honest, based on Ruger's own preferences, he did think that the elder sister was more or less beautiful. Well, beauty is a subjective feeling, and it is difficult to completely replace it with beauty. But Minerva here is completely different. This one gave Ruger the feeling that she was more like the Greek female mercenary Cassandra in a certain assassin game. Although they look completely different. Whether she is so beautiful that she can make fish sink to the bottom of the water, geese fall, and the moon hide in shame, this question may be debatable. But saying that she is not beautiful at all is absolutely nonsense. Speaking of which, Ruger has so many actresses who rely on their faces. They can't act but deceive the world that they can, and they have cheated the judges of various acting awards. Ahem, fortunately, there is no so-called capital in the dark world. In short, Minerva is very good at acting, and she acts quite well. It reminds Ruger of when he was working part-time. He was obviously slacking off but acted very busy. That kind of contagious striving, hard work, but without any achievements, is exactly the same as him. With the way she acted, I'm afraid that hundreds of times the ghosts were dispersed by her, but in the end, they couldn't rush through the short distance of a few meters. However, the ghosts didn't seem to expect that things would have such a chance to develop. They clearly blocked the attack of the female warrior and trapped Tia in the encirclement, but they didn't dare to take Tia away directly. After nearly half an hour of stalemate, a team of patrol bees flew over hurriedly and cast a string of poison needles at Tia. Seeing her fall down, the ghosts threw out some kind of silk-like material to surround her, and finally took her away. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu Mechanic. Author, Shanmao Aichiji. Chapter 68. Hey, how's it going with Tia? The female soldier sitting in the trailer behind the car asked for the nth time. Wrapped in spider silk like a rice dumpling, and suspended in the air by 4 or 5 patrol bees, it's still like that. Ruger sighed. At this time, about 10 minutes had passed since Tia was taken away. The speed of the transport plane formation in the sky is neither too slow nor too fast. Generally speaking, it almost looks like a truck traveling on the highway. So even though the road below was bumpy, Ruger could barely keep up after maxing out the speed. Is it true? The female warrior asked doubtfully, can you really see Tia's pet? What does it look like? Tia always said it was a big cat, and said it looked very artistic. I really want to meet it. This, Lu Ji thought to himself, how do you say this? What does it mean to look artistic? Just say it looks abstract. However, after taking a look at the old man lying by the periscope in front of him, cocking his ears and waiting for his answer, Luger wisely decided not to answer the female warrior's question. After thinking for a while, he asked, can't you all see him? Can't see it? There was a hint of helplessness in Minerva's voice. Don't blame me, even Joshua and Woden can't see it. No one else in the entire Rog town can see it now. The Joshua and Woden mentioned by the female warrior were the other 2 people in Tia's team. Joshua is the druid of Middle Eastern descent who can transform into a werewolf. Woden is the necromancer with flowing blonde hair. To be honest, when Luger first heard the names of these 2 people, he vomited in his heart. Joshua, in the mythology of Middle Eastern monotheism, that is the name of the savior. The one that everyone is more familiar with that starts with coconut is actually a Greek phonetic mistranslation that has been translated several times. As for Woden, this name may be unfamiliar to everyone, but if you change it to another name, it will be very familiar to people. That's Odin. Odin is the name of Woden from Central Europe when he went to the Nordic mashup, the god of magic, the god of wisdom and the god of gods. Including the female warrior Minerva, the names of these 3 siblings are actually the names of gods. What's even more interesting is that this god's name also corresponds to their racial bloodline. The Druids of Middle Eastern descent there also call the names of Middle Eastern gods, or prophets. The necromancer is a typical Germanic man with blonde hair and blue eyes, so he has a Germanic god name. When the female barbarian comes here, she directly calls the Roman god by name. To be honest, Luger even doubted whether there really was a god named Tia in some mythology in the world. In this way, the styles of their four-person team all matched up. Later, when he heard that the names of the three of them were also given by Tia's parents, Lugger immediately doubted the true identity of Tia's parents. Tia's mother is said to be a native of the dark, and she is also a scholar-type person who is proficient in alchemy but doesn't use magic very much. Ruger doesn't doubt her very much. But Tia's father is said to be a lost person. Translation is equivalent to saying that he is an earthling. It is really possible for an earthling to deliberately give someone such a name out of bad taste. Give other people's children or adopted orphans such nasty names, and just give your own daughter a nice name. Could this guy be a time traveler too? Plus this guy calls himself Max, the Max from Mad Max. Run into the apocalyptic world and use the name of the protagonist who is the originator of the apocalyptic series. Lugger only felt that there were too many doubts about the senior. Shaking his head to put his thoughts back, Luge continued along with the previous topic. Don't even the mages in Luge Town see Launeoxel. Mage, paladin, nun, druid, necromancer, no matter what profession, no matter what power system, you can't see it, Minerva said. Maybe it's just because none of them have the same power system as Tia, Lugger said. Well, that's what everyone thinks. After all the other systems in the town are there, only the assassin's legacy is broken. The female warrior said meaningfully. What do you mean? Ruger immediately noticed that there was something in Minerva's words. Well, do you know why that witch Anya keeps causing trouble for Tia? Why? Because the last person in Rogue Town who wants Tia to exist is their mages, Minerva said. Because the assassin turned out to be the mage killer. The purpose of assassin's existence is to kill those fallen mages. Lugger had known these things for a long time, and naturally he would not be intimidated by the female warrior's words. After thinking for a while, he asked again, so, the strongest Nephilim in Rogue Town are the mages now? I can't say the strongest. But the most powerful, yes, the female warrior nodded. I thought Tia was excluded because she was the last person who could make a lost weapon. Well, that's one aspect. The female warrior said, but things always have a sequence and a priority. The most fundamental reason is obviously that. As for the weapons of the lost. How should I say this? There's no need to blame someone if you want to, Lugger said. Yes, that's what it means. The female warrior patted her thigh and praised. Ruger didn't completely believe the female warrior's analysis. He believed that the mage was looking for trouble with Tia because of the characteristics of the assassin's professional power system. But he didn't believe that the lost weapon was a completely made-up excuse. It is more likely that this is the result of a consensus between two overlapping factions. In any case, this means that even if Tia completes the task of bringing the seeds back, her situation will not be much better after returning. In this situation, everyone's current task is particularly important. Rescuing the commander of the main defense force of the rogue camp, the rogues, should allow Tia to gain a heavyweight ally. If he thinks along this line of thought, Ruger feels that it is necessary for him to learn more about the current power of Rogue Town. Even if it is not for Tia, even if it is for himself not to be ambushed and capsized in the ditch, he should be prepared in advance. The most critical core of all possible information should be counted from Tia's parents. You asked what Tia's parents were like. The female warrior recalled with some nostalgia. Well, they are all very good people, no matter from whose perspective, Nephilim or lost ones. Mr. Max is a very sunny and humorous person. Yeah, and very strong. The kind of strength that exceeds that of ordinary humans. My master even suspected that he had barbarian blood. But he also mastered the profound lost one weapon making ability. Oh, by the way, he is also very popular with women. Aunt Leah has punished him for this many times. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Doomsday Start Draws Luodu Mechanic. Author, Shan Mao Aichiji. Chapter 69. Aunt Leah. Ruger always felt that he had heard this name somewhere, and asked curiously. Huh? Didn't Tia tell you? Aunt Leah is her mother, a descendant of an ancient alchemist school. The female warrior was about to say something, but Ruger had to interrupt her, stepped on the accelerator to the bottom, and rushed forward. What happened? Did Tia's pet disappear? We lost contact with Tia. Minerva asked hurriedly. No, they stopped, Ruger replied. Those patrol bees arrived. It took nearly 20 minutes to run at a speed of 80 kilometers per hour, and it ran about 26 or 27 kilometers. Even though those flying insects did not fly in a straight line and went around many bends, Ruger almost went through half of the underground caves in the strip. In order to avoid alerting the enemy as much as possible, Ruger kept the distance from the straight line in front at least 2 kilometers, sometimes even up to 5 kilometers. Although this increases the risk of losing the opponent, it allows him to choose a shorter and better route when the opponent will also take a detour, which saves more time. This time is no exception. He bypassed 2 ghost military stations in the middle and rushed to the place where Tia was imprisoned in just a few minutes. Before coming here, Ruger imagined many possible looks of this place. What caves at the foot of the mountain? A castle built of soil or even biological tissues like ghosts. Or a stone fortress built by digging underground stones. But he never expected that this place would end up like this. This is neither a cave nor a fortress. It is basically a modern military camp. No, not modern modernization, but modernization in the World War II era. This place is like the military camp in the urban legend of World War II, where the mustache moved into a cave or underground cave under the pressure of the Allied attack. Yes, an underground arsenal. The entire area is based on a corner of the mountain valley. It is surrounded by rocks on 3 sides and a steel wall on one side. The walls were covered with heavy firepower, all of which were classic weapons from World War II. Even Ruger could see the famous 88mm anti-aircraft gun. It was a prototype of the 88mm anti-tank gun in a sense. Although the 2 guns of the same caliber were actually products of 2 companies competing against each other. The winner of the victory became the 88mm anti-aircraft gun. The loser went back to improve it, and after referring to the advantages of the former, he created the 88mm anti-tank gun. Ruger was shocked to see so many human-operated weapons here for the first time. The most terrifying thing was that the thing he had always been most worried about came true. That is, the weapons were no longer operated by insects, but humanoids. The forces that created these biochemical beasts really had no intention of sparing humans. They could equip caterpillars with heavy machine guns, so would they still care about transforming various mammals into humanoids? No. Now the combatants and even the logistics personnel inside and outside this underground military camp and arsenal are a group of half-beasts with different prototype races but all hairy. They were not the green-skinned orcs of Oak, but half-human and half-animal, biologically modified humans. Lions, tigers, leopards, bears, pigs, and dogs. They were of different heights and sizes, and therefore equipped with different weapons. Ruger lay on a nearby hill and looked out for a long time, marveling at the sight. It was not that this military camp was difficult to capture, after all, it was just an old factory from World War II. It was mainly the intelligence of these orcs that made Ruger sigh. It was not that they were too high to scare him. But it was too low. These guys just looked like humans, and their brains were their own. Ruger watched for a while and found that only a few trained orcs could follow orders like lions and tigers in the circus. But most of them could only passively accept orders, but were extremely rigid when executing orders, and in most cases, they could not hide their beastly nature, and mostly just slacked off. The dog-headed men who were operating flamethrowers and light machine guns as cannon fodder on the front line almost fired bullets several times while playing with their companions. If it weren't for the bear commander who was supervising them around and slapped the dog in question to death with a slap, I'm afraid that the dozen dog-headed men nearby would have died under its gun. Seeing them like this, Ruger also understood why the orcs' ghosts only exist here. Or, why other places have been sparing no effort to produce those insect ghosts. Compared to letting human ghosts with insufficient IQ use guns and weapons like humans, it is better to directly use those insects that have been specialized for some guns and guns. How is it? Have you come up with a solution after looking for a long time? Tia is still waiting for us. The female warrior urged beside her. Don't worry, I'm waiting for a reply. Well, it's here. As he spoke, the old noisy man who had returned to Tia before came back again. Is Tia okay? Ruger asked. Don't worry, with me here, how could anything happen to the master? Is she ready? No problem, the silk cocoons and other things have been dealt with by the master. She won't be killed by the ghost now. But the terrain there is complicated, and it's hard for her to cooperate with you. No need, Ruger waved his hand, as long as she is safe, we can let go. Then, let's start. As he said that, Ruger climbed down from the top of the mountain. Hey, what should I do? The female warrior asked behind him. Wait for my news, I will give you a signal, and then you will rush over directly. What about you? The female warrior looked at Ruger strangely, who did not get into the cockpit but ran to the back seat. Ruger laughed, I'll say hello to these grandfathers. Let them see what the younger generations have achieved decades later. Grandfathers? Are they those beasts that look like humans? The female warrior had no idea that the so-called grandfathers in Ruger's mouth were not people at all, but those ancient lost ones' weapons, guns and cannons. In fact, the development of later weapons has not changed much in the theoretical structure of the weapons themselves. To use a metaphor, these old guns and cannons from World War II are like the earliest internal combustion engine cars of mankind. The weapons of later generations are like sedans or sports cars developed in the 21st century. Yes, today's sedans and sports cars have various comfortable functions, and even automatic driving. But in the final analysis, its engine, chassis, brakes, etc. are not different in nature from the earliest internal combustion engine cars. However, even if the essential principles have not changed fundamentally, the technical progress in the details has accumulated little by little, and the final effect may be very different. For example, the new artillery of Ruger with a caliber of 88 mm can quickly fire 5 shells within 2 seconds. This is not something that the grandfathers in World War II could imagine. There were such fast guns in World War II, but the caliber could not be so large. There are guns with such a large caliber, but they cannot be so fast. It is not impossible to have both, and the gun body can be enlarged several times or dozens of times and loaded on the ship. It is really a foolish dream to have this, and do all of them. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu Mechanic. Author, Shanmao Aichiji. Chapter 70. The half-beasts in the military camp were still playing and frolicking as their nature dictated, while 15 high-explosive grenades from the 3-wheeled artillery had already flown out. When the beast-headed man who first noticed something was wrong ran to the heavy weapons to prepare for a counter-attack, 15 shells had evenly landed among the heavy firepower. The sound of explosions continued, directly detonating the various ammunition piled next to the heavy firepower, which in turn triggered a chain explosion. Yes, these beast-headed people dared to place the ammunition so close to the artillery, obviously they did not even have basic combat literacy. Google searched can. Gui may used these guys as the guards, which was really unlucky. Ruger originally planned to use the rapid firepower of the mortar howitzer to knock out the opponent's heavy firepower, and then immediately rushed over with the female warrior. But seeing that the combat literacy of these half-beasts was even lower than he thought, he naturally would not give up this advantage. He turned back and refilled the artillery automatic loader with ammunition, and immediately fired several more rounds of artillery. He used artillery to plow the military camp directly from the periphery. The explosives loaded in the high-explosive shells of his 88mm mortar howitzer were no less than those of the 122mm howitzer. Although mortars don't shoot far, they can hold a lot of explosives in the warhead. The effect of the explosion is definitely no less than that of ordinary heavy artillery. Because of this, in this battlefield where beyond visual range combat is not the main focus, Ruger finally chose this kind of artillery. Ruger vented his firepower while taking advantage of it. He was still wondering why the other commander made such a serious mistake. Combatants in positions like the guards cannot be kept at home. They should be allowed to participate in front-line battles as much as possible to gain more combat experience. Otherwise, no matter how good their capabilities are on paper, they are just a good-looking shell. But think about the ghosts here. Not to mention the last 50 years, at least there have been no major battles in the last 20 years. The problem of insufficient combat experience may not be that the other commander does not want to solve it, but it is just that a good cook cannot cook without rice. Ruger's words are a bit unreasonable. But he doesn't care about these. He only knows that the points given by these guys are not few but not many. On average, each one is about 3 or 4 points. Combined with their really unsatisfactory strength, Ruger only feels that this dog-headed man can match the points of 2 fallen demons, which is simply a joke. After happily plowing the camp with artillery in the outer circle, Ruger remembered that the female warrior was still waiting for the signal, and hurriedly shouted to her. "Minerva, charge!" As soon as the charge signal came out, the female warrior on the other side rushed out impatiently with 2 long swords. She swung her weapon at the panicked beastman and laughed. "Ha ha ha! It's finally time for me to take action. Get out of my way." The female warrior had been holding back for a long time, and now she was like a tiger out of a cage. Her desire to attack was simply too strong. The guards over there were already dizzy from the bombardment of Ruger's artillery fire, and now seeing such a humanoid tank rushing out from nowhere, they were naturally even more panicked. Although the weapons in their hands had the advantage of distance, they were not accurate at all. Even if a few shots hit the female warrior sporadically with the advantage of numbers and firing, they were blocked by her thick armor plate. Minerva found that the armor Ruger made for her was still useful against these weapons, and she was more eager to fight. She was like a god of war, rushing through the crowd of orcs as if she was in an empty space. "Run! Mom!" Although these orcs shouted in the language of the lost, the emotional transmission was not hindered by the language barrier. Seeing that their morale was low and they were defeated in one battle, the female warrior was not soft-hearted, but killed them more fiercely. In her words, the battlefield does not believe in tears. Weakness can be understood, but cowardice is not worthy of sympathy. Amid the various weird shouts of the beast-headed people, Ruger also rushed over in his chariot. The rear row artillery was not directly operated by anyone, but it was not completely lost. After deciding on the strategy of using Xiaotaya as bait, Ruger worked overtime to add a remote control launch device and an automatic loader to this mortar howitzer. These relatively simple automatic devices are definitely not as efficient as well-trained personnel. Not to mention compared with super gunners like Taya, who are physically strong and have a high affinity with artillery. But at least it can be used. The effect is probably that the average firing rate has dropped from 2 seconds and 5 rounds to an average of 2 seconds and 1 round. The automatic loader has a low fault tolerance rate, so it can only sacrifice speed to make its movements more accurate. As for aiming, it is even more troublesome. There were already a lot of equipment in Ruger's cockpit, and there was not enough space to add more electronic instruments. In the end, he set several fixed positions on the remote control site, so that the direction of the artillery aiming corresponded to several fixed positions directly in front of the vehicle. For example, the closest fixed target position is a 2-meter high position 50 meters in front of the tank. The farthest is the same position 1 kilometer in front. In this way, even when driving the tank forward, Ruger can use the artillery in the back row to clear the way for himself. Of course, what he used most easily were the 2 general-purpose machine guns on the front of the vehicle. After having enough raw materials and points, he finally replaced the 2 M3 general-purpose machines that were somewhat outdated with the FMAG with a better reputation. At a distance of about 200 meters, the difference in the actual threat of the 2 general-purpose machines to the enemy is not particularly large. But with the blessing of metaphysical belief, Ruger felt that whether it was accuracy, firepower, or even reliability, it had immediately reached a higher level. With humanoid tanks leading the way in front and machine guns and artillery bombarding behind, the beast-headed people who were originally wild beasts were attacked by 2 beasts of different styles at the same time, but turned into weak pheasants. What lions, tigers, leopards, bears, jackals, they felt like a group of frightened rabbits. They all ran away, and some even hit their heads against a tree in panic. The so-called rabbit waiting by the tree. The so-called pig hitting the tree, it hits the pig. In comparison, it is the pig-headed ghosts whose prototypes are wild boars, relying on their thick skin and flesh, who act more methodically. However, the firepower of the old-fashioned light weapons such as STG-44 and K-98 in the hands of these beastmen was really unable to penetrate the armor of the 2 unreasonable guys. As for the firepower of the MP-40, it was not enough to tickle the 2. During this period, there were also anti-tank recoilless guns such as Panzerfaust. But the power of that thing was a little behind in the late World War II, and the principle of its armor-piercing shells was the Monroe effect that Ruger was most familiar with. Ruger only needed to stick some minimum-level explosive reactive armor on the outside of the armor plate of the small tank to minimize the threat of weapons such as Panzerfaust. In the end, those relatively elite beastmen warriors, no matter how they held their positions, only slowed down the advancement of the 2 men a little. Since the first shot was fired, it took only a few minutes for Ruger's side to almost completely paralyze the defense of a large military camp.